Chapter 11. I'm Black and I'm Proud. The 1960s were a time of great change in America. Young people all over America were asking questions about their country. They did not always believe what their parents believed. They wanted change. At the March on Washington, a young singer called Bob Dylan put the thoughts of young Americans into his song, "The times they are a-changin'." "Things are changing fast," the song said. "The old must listen to the young, and they cannot stop change." Young blacks did not want to wait patiently for change. Although they knew that Martin Luther King had worked hard for equal rights, they thought that change was happening too slowly. They wanted power for black people, and they did not want to ask politely for it. Perhaps violence was necessary for change, they thought. In 1966, Bobby Seale and Huey Newton started the Black Panther Party. The Panthers did not agree with Martin Luther King about the use of nonviolence. They said that blacks should buy guns to protect themselves from attacks by whites. Huey Newton said that the Civil Rights Law of 1964 was too little, too late. After a fight between the Panthers and the police, Newton was arrested and put into prison because he killed a white police officer. Crowds of Panther supporters marched through the streets shouting, "Free Huey!" Other Panthers died in battles with the police. Most white Americans were afraid of the Black Panthers. They thought that they were violent criminals. But the Panthers also did some good work. They opened schools in poor black neighborhoods and gave food and clothes to blacks. After a few years, the Black Panther Party broke into smaller groups, but its message reached many young African Americans and made them proud to be black. They started to learn about Africa, eat African food, and wear African clothes. Another person who wanted a different America for blacks was Malcolm X. In the past, many blacks had the name of their slave owner as their last name, so Malcolm changed his last name from Little to X. For him, it was a way of saying goodbye to slavery. Like the Black Panthers, Malcolm X did not agree with Martin Luther King about the use of violence. Blacks should not ask for help from whites, he thought. Blacks should help themselves. Violence was necessary when you were fighting for your rights. Malcolm said that blacks should fight violence with violence. It was the only language that white racists understood. "If a man speaks the language of violence," said Malcolm, "you can't speak to him in the language of peace. He'll break you in two. If a man speaks French, you can't speak to him in German. You have to find out what this man speaks. Once you know his language, learn how to speak his language. Then we can talk." Many young blacks agreed with Malcolm X more than with Martin Luther King. They were angry that they still did not have the same rights as whites. Poor blacks living in the big cities of the North wanted to vote, but they wanted other things too. They wanted better houses and more jobs. In many of the poorer neighborhoods of America's big cities, young blacks rioted. Many people died in these riots. In the 60s, many important black writers and musicians became famous in America. Writers like James Baldwin and Toni Morrison showed Americans what the lives of black people were like. In his book, The Fire Next Time, Baldwin warned of terrible violence in the future. To stop this, whites must change their ways, he said. The black musician, Stevie Wonder, sang about the difficulties of young blacks. One of his songs told the story of a young boy who was born in the South but moved to Chicago to find work. He finds that in the North he is free, but free only to be poor. Why was anyone surprised that young blacks were angry? Perhaps the most famous black man in the 1960s was the boxer Muhammad Ali. Born Cassius Marcellus Clay in 1942 in Louisville, Kentucky, young Clay won an Olympic gold medal in 1960. He fought the world champion Sonny Liston in 1964, and to the surprise of most people, Clay won. After the fight, he surprised the world when he said that he had become a Muslim and had changed his name to Muhammad Ali. "Don't call me Cassius Clay," he said. "That's a slave name." Ali was loud and proud and clever. "I am the greatest," he said. And he was. No one could beat him. He began to speak out against racism. In 1967, he refused to join the U.S. Army and fight in Vietnam. Because of this, he was put in prison, and he was told that he was not the world champion anymore. When he got out of prison, he beat George Foreman to become world champion again. Ali said, "When I refused to fight in Vietnam, I wasn't a hero. I just wanted to be free. I wanted America to be America." Chapter 12. Black and White, Unite and Fight. The late 1960s were a time of change for Martin Luther King, too. Although he was always against violence, he began to see that there were many different kinds of violence. King was from the South, and he wanted freedom and equal rights for the blacks of the South. But life for blacks in northern cities was not easy either.